in California, KERU Blythe, KBBF Calistoga Santa Rosa, Idaho, KBSX HD3 Boise, Iowa, KWI HD3
This is
Sioux City.
KBBF 89.1 FM, Calistoga.
Esta es KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga. Nuestro teléfono en cabina 707-545-0318. KBBF, la voz de tu comunidad.
All right, hello everybody. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I am your host, Kaiya Kramer, and this is episode 61, my interview with LGBT attorney Naomi Metz, who is sitting here in the studio with me right now. And Naomi, thanks for coming in and joining us here on the Queer Life.
You're welcome. It's really an honor to be able to participate in this and to know about it. I was really, really happy to be introduced to you and to this radio show.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny the LGBT circles or leadership, if you will, and the North Bay here is sort of everybody's, prowling around like vultures. Ooh, look, an opportunity.
I think it's great that you're doing this. I'm glad to know about it and be able to tell people about it. So thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah. And for those of you out there wondering and listening, yes, we are still on the air. 61 episodes later. That is 122 hours of me on the radio. I'm pretty sure a number of clicks just happened right now. Oh, time to go listen to NPR. Oh, something depressing.
Right. This is probably more exciting. Sure. At least more interesting.
I certainly hope so. At least more gay. That's
right.
So I did say, and again, for those of you listening, LGBT news, and that is LGBT as in LGBTQQIA, and I love my long form version of that acronym, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, and sometimes allies, depending on who has their definition of the the acronym.
Yeah.
People are like, there's too many letters. I'm like, I agree. That's why the show's called The Queer Life, not the LGBTQIAA life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I think queer is a perfectly acceptable word. And I also think that, we have to recognize and honor the fact that it's not for a lot of our community. And
right.
So I love that it's called The Queer Life. And I'm sure there are people who take exception to that.
Right.
Because of the history of that word. But,
yeah, it's a hard word, and it was a harder word for a long time.
Yeah.
And I respect a lot of people who have had suffered at the hands of that word. But I don't. The reason why I did choose the word is it's sort of a general consensus in the liberal, educated, progressive leadership of the LGBT community, the younger community, that's saying, "Hey, this is our word now."
Yeah.
I'm sure in several years I'll be complaining about some new word.
It turns out you're probably right.
But anyway, just to give a little agenda for the evening. This first hour here is now 5 minutes after the hour. That's how they say it over on NPR. It is now 5 minutes after the hour here, and this moment has been brought to you by me because the Queer Life Radio Show and KBBF is a volunteer-run organization, and if you do indeed enjoy this show and any other programming on this radio station, please go to the website, donate, go to kbbf-fm.org, hit the donate link. It's got this magical technology called PayPal. I know I'd never heard of it either, where you can go on and instead of spending $5 on your caramel mocha frappuccino with extra sugar and sadness on it, you can support local programming. And we will greatly appreciate it. In fact, I might send you an email saying, hey, I appreciate this, with a picture of a thumbs up. I'm sorry. Don't worry, this isn't going to be one of those pledge drives.
Okay, good.
The next hour will be the news and perspectives portion of the show, where I go through a carefully curated list of LGBT news and modern perspectives so that you can be kept informed and up to date because and again, just as another disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, she's a lawyer. So anything you hear coming from my voice should not be taken as strict legal or medical advice. Anything you hear from her,
not strict legal advice either.
Not strict legal advice either. Please consult your own lawyer, please consult your own doctor. And if you like this show, which again is not medical or legal advice, and you want to hear more not medical or legal advice, go to thequeerlife.org. If that domain name is too difficult to put in, you can ask the almighty Google The Queer Life, and it will bring you over to this episode and all 60 other episodes of the show. Also, we have a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and okay, I'm tired of plugging. Anyway, Naomi. So this is again, this is episode 61, my interview with LGBT attorney Naomi Metz. Shows that because it has a nice little SEO ring on it. Of course, you do other types of law as well.
Right. I'm primarily actually not an LGBT attorney. I'm primarily an estate planning attorney, which means that I help people with their wills and their trusts. And but I have always focused my practice on working with the LGBT community because especially, I mean, at least until the recent Supreme Court decision, and still for those folks who are not married, the default rules do not apply to us, and they haven't for a long time. And so we, in order to protect ourselves and our families and our assets, it's been really important to make sure that we have the contracts in place. And that's what generally what I think estate planning is about. It's about saying who I want to take care of me and who I want to have my stuff. And so it always felt to me like a great way that I could practice law and also be an advocate sort of every day in my law practice. So that's what I do in my day job. and my practice is not exclusively with the LGBT community, but I do feel like I have a lot of privilege here in Sonoma County.
Yeah. So it's no straights allowed. That's not your policy.
No, I mean, generally the truth is that because the laws have been so complicated for the LGBT community, and especially for same-sex couples, I've always felt like if I can do the work well for same-sex couples, I can certainly do the work well for straight couples for whom the law is written to protect. So that's a good point. A lot of people seem to think that different laws apply to whether you're straight or
or queer identified.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to jump in and in a little bit and ask you
Okay.
about the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage in a little bit. But the question that I ask everybody at the beginning of every interview, and again, just to remind those listeners out there, the show is called The Queer Life, the and queer and life. And the question I'm asking is, what is, for the audience, your gender identity and sexual orientation and preferred gender pronouns?
So I'm a cisgender woman. I'm a lesbian, and my preferred pronouns are she and her.
Thank you. Yeah. And again, I ask that question for people who are wondering, well, why does it matter? The only reason why it matters is because it's within the context of this show. I'm sharing LGBT perspectives, and that's a part of it. And also, to let a lot of you know out there who might be questioning your gender identity or sexual orientation, that even as a queer identified person, you too can become a professional and have a good career and go on to do some amazing work, like Naomi here. So again, it is such a privilege to have you here and to have you sharing your great knowledge.
Thank you.
So, I mean, first and foremost, let's do a little bit of history here. Why'd you get into law? What spurred you to get into this act of masochism? I mean, this
Well, it turns
very
out law
engaged
school
career.
is over for me, so I passed the masochistic part mostly. I had been working. When I went to college, I was interested in doing environmental work, and I did some of that for a little while after college, but decided that it wasn't. I was still sort of looking for something, and so I started looking around at graduate programs, because that's what I do when for me, that's what I do when I don't know what to do, is I go back to school. And so I had decided that I was going to do a number of schools offer joint JD and Masters in Public Policy programs. And I thought that that would be a good match for me, because I was thinking that I wanted to do like legislative policy work or something along those lines. And then in 2004, my wife and I went to San Francisco and were married. We waited in line for a couple days and got married, and that was amazing. It turns out it actually did have an impact for us. And then the Supreme Court made the decision on those licenses, and they said not only are the licenses invalid, but it turns out that anyone who got one of the licenses can't say that could not have reasonably relied on the license. And at that point, I was a city planner, and I thought, well, if someone comes into my office and I give them a planning permit,
Right.
I'm a city official, they must be able to rely on the permit that I just gave them. So it doesn't really make sense to me that the court could say, actually, all of you people who went in and got the license and filled out the application, and that you couldn't have relied on it. And so I decided then that I was going to have to go to law school to figure it out. And I knew from the beginning that I wanted to be working with the LGBT community as an attorney. And I thought originally that was going to be doing some kind of impact litigation work, perhaps working for the National Center for Lesbian Rights, which does really amazing work. And then I did an externship for them. And my job as an extern was to answer they have a national hotline. And my job was to answer the calls that came in, and then research and get back to the folks who had called. And I found that more than once I got calls from people who were asking about their, something that pertained to them personally. And I had to call them back after doing the research and tell them that, in fact, they had no legal remedy for their situation. Like there was
Really?
a woman who called the one that always stands out for me is this woman called from, I want to say it was from Arkansas. And she had been together with her girlfriend for a dozen years. The girlfriend had two young children when they got together, and the woman who was calling had helped to raise them for the time that they'd been together. And they had recently broken up, and the biological mom of the children was now not letting the woman who was calling see her see these kids who, although not hers biologically,
who she
had helped to raise them for a dozen years. And so I did the research, and I had to call her back and say, yeah, it turns out that actually at that point in time, there was no legal remedy for her.
I mean, what kind of head trip is that to get a call back? Sorry, can't help you.
Right. And for me, being the one who had to call her back, I was like, it was sort of heartbreaking for me to have to give that answer to her. And that happened more than once. And I realized pretty quickly that I couldn't actually work for an organization where, when I had to say no, or when we lost a case, that it felt so personally connected to me, that I wanted to cry about it. And so I realized that wasn't going to work out for me. And then I started to learn about estate planning, and I really do think that it's been such an important work, I think, because the rules about property and taxes and family, in California, the community property rules essentially have always been written to protect straight people, and primarily straight white men who own property, going back to the time when women and children were property. And those rules haven't changed much.
They aren't still.
So it turns out that like I said earlier, I realized that the way that I could help to protect myself and my own community was to make sure that my community had these documents in place that are sort of some of the only documents that will allow you to get around the default rules. And so here I am doing this work.
So you saw some issues, you felt like you wanted to help some people, and then you literally went and found a way so that you could help these people. Yes, that's turns out, yes, thank you. That's a good way of explaining that. So you are a masochist. No. Perhaps, yes. Although I love it. I worked for a couple of firms after law school, and I started my own practice about 3 years ago. And one of the things that I really love about having my own practice is that I have since I'm making up my own schedule, I have the time, I can make the time to be involved in the community in other ways. Right. And to take, to use my position of a lot of privilege to also be an advocate in other ways for the community. And I love it. It's my favorite thing to do. Like I work because I have to work. Yes. I'm an advocate because I love it, and it makes me happy to do it, and I get to work with amazing people, and so I'm also really thrilled to have that opportunity at this point. Yeah, seriously. And again, thank you so much for doing all the advocacy work and the effect that you're having on the community at large. And what I want to put out there is that the work that you're doing is tireless and sometimes thankless. I think I mean, why not, go off into the sunset like John Wayne and just say, hey, I got a good job now, and this is my life. People take care of themselves. Why keep doing this work? Yeah, I don't think. I think that it's too easy to look into history and not
distant history, I mean, distant history included, but also recent history, to realize that, like, to assume that it could never be me, that I could never be the one who's the criminal, whose being is criminalized, or I think that that's to me, that feels like the reason that people are often people are apathetic, is because they just assume, like, it could never be me. I'm never going to be the one that the law is going to say is illegal. And I don't think, I think that our history that's not borne out by history. And so I feel like I have a responsibility to do what I can to sort of make the world a better place. And since I can't write $1 million checks, instead I do, I can use the resources that I have available to me and can share them. And it gives me a lot of personal satisfaction. I mean, I get a lot of joy out of meeting the people who are in the community and learning from them. I'm, it's definitely not a one-way street. I contribute, and also I get a lot from it.
Why do you think it's so important to do this LGBT advocacy that you're doing? I hear a lot of people say to me, well, we've had there's same-sex marriage has been ruled, and so the fight's over, right? There's it. What do you keep banging on about?
The answer is same-sex marriage. The right for any couple to be married is awesome, and I am thrilled that now there's federal recognition of my marriage to my wife. I'm thrilled for that, and I'm thrilled that I get the benefits that come with that. And it turns out that marriage is only a piece. The right to get married only affects those people who are married or who want to get married. That's the only people it affects. Right. And I think we know, for a wide variety of reasons, that there are many people in our community who don't want to get married. So then the right to be married doesn't affect them. So this is, I mean, clearly it's been such a public issue, and in addition to just actually getting the right itself, it's also allowed discussions about the LGBT community to come on to get on the table in a way that they haven't before. But it turns out that there are so many things that are still challenges for our community, and they include things like let's say, like, racial justice. There are people in the LGBT community who are white and who are not white. The racial justice issues that we see in our country right now, those are LGBT issues. Economic justice issues are LGBT issues. We know, for example, that trans women of color sort of empirically are the group that is in one of the lowest socioeconomic level. They tend to live in severe poverty more than any other group in our community. That's an LGBT issue. Right. Gender justice is an issue, certainly, and you can see it within our own community. The divisions between male and female folks in our community. The same issues with the fact that women get paid less than men. That affects me whether I'm a lesbian or a straight woman. Right. So that matters. Immigration is an LGBT issue because we have families in the LGBT community who are also dealing with immigration issues. Right. And also, it turns out that LGBT people who are in the immigration system tend to be faced with more severe discrimination than many of those folks who are perceived as or who are straight. Yeah, the ICE detention centers. Yeah, not nice for the LGBT community at all. Right. So immigration is an LGBT issue. the right for people to use the bathroom the right for people to use the bathroom for the gender with which they identify.
Right.
That's an LGBT issue. We still have to deal with that.
A lot of people, even within the LGBT community, would argue with you on these points. There's sort of an intersectionality between different members of the queer community, and which is something I brought up quite frequently on this show. There's sort of a divided thinking on whose rights should be in the spotlight, or who should be a part of the queer community. And obviously there's no answers to this.
Well, no, but I think that, I obviously, from what I've said, and also from the work that I do, I believe really strongly and I believe really strongly that the LGBT issues, when I come to the table in any of my advocacy work, I'm not coming to the table only as a lesbian. I'm coming to the table as a woman. I'm coming to the table as a progressive. I'm coming to the table as someone who's, concerned about racial justice and economic justice. And so in order for me to be able to sort of participate fully, there has to be an acknowledgement that those are all parts of the LGBT community. Those are all pieces of the, what our community, those are all things that affect our community. We're not all only our sexual orientation.
Right.
We have all these other parts of our identity. And so, there's a lot of discussion about how to address the intersectionality, and it is very difficult. But it turns out that if I, as an LGBT advocate, show up for a women's reproductive rights organization as a supporter of them,
right,
then it becomes a lot easier for me to go to them as an LGBT activist and say, okay, now I need you to show up for me as an LGBT person.
Yeah.
And that's true with any of the sort of identity pieces. If we if we can work together, we're better if we work together. But it makes sense that it makes sense that if I don't show up for the communities that are affected by my other identity pieces, that it's going to be really hard for me to go to them and say, okay, you show up for me.
Absolutely. It makes me think of the film that came out within the last year called Pride, which I thought was a very well done film. It was a very white centric film,
but it was a white story.
Yeah, but
white-centric story,
yeah,
right?
And but it was good, and it was the story of LGBT, particularly gays and lesbians, in the UK who were supporting the miners and the miners' strikes. In the 80s. And the phrase that stuck out to me in my head was gays and lesbians support the miners. And it's the idea just kind of rings over and over again. It's the idea that we need to help each other. We need to support each other. And no one group, not even the entire combined LGBT community, even if we can, I feel like we have more disparity than the Republican Party right now.
Right, but if we can, if we can connect, if we can find common threads in other parts of our identity, then it makes it easier for us to get over get over ourselves and get over those disparities and come together and figure out how to move forward together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, we're going to go away for a short break here. But if you are just tuning in right now, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I'm your host, Kaiya Kramer. I'm interviewing Naomi Metz, an attorney here in Sonoma County. And we are talking about LGBT issues and the law, but this is not legal advice. Anyway, we'll be right back after the short break to hear some words from our sponsors. Thanks so much for listening.
KBBF 89.1 FM, conquistando tu corazón.
right. Hello, everybody. We're having a dance party up in here at the Queer Life Radio Show. LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I'm your host, Kaiya Kramer. I am with my guest, Naomi Metz, this evening. Local Sonoma County attorney from the law office of Naomi E. Metz, who has a special focus on the unique and still often complex needs of the LGBT community. Yes, I lifted that from her bio that she sent me. Thanks so much for providing me a soundbite.
You're welcome.
But again, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Sure.
Yeah, so we were just talking, we were talking about a whole bunch of things there, sort of divisiveness within the LGBT community, the need for continued advocacy, because just because gay marriage happened don't mean that the work's done. Yeah. And again, I say gay marriage for a lot of people, it's same-sex marriage. The headlines are just used to saying gay marriage because we don't believe that bisexual people exist. Yeah, the other week was actually Bisexual Awareness Week. I'm ashamed to say that was the first time I'd heard of a Bisexual Awareness Week.
Good, you are now more aware.
I am now more aware. Mission accomplished. Don't say that. But okay, so we've got a lot of stuff to talk about here. Just kind of a nice little shout out here. I see that you went to my alma mater, UC Berkeley.
For law school, I did.
Yeah.
I went to Mills for my undergraduate, which is lovely. I love Mills.
Mills is awesome too. I'm a huge fan. A lot of cool people from there. But okay, so let's get into. You mentioned in your bio here that you did some work with SB 1827. What is that?
Oh, well. I didn't do work with it. I actually did. We had at Berkeley, we had to do a thesis for in order to graduate from law school, and I did my thesis about SB 1827. It was a bill that was passed in 2006 that said that couples who are registered as domestic partners with the state of California, starting in 2007, would have to file their state income taxes jointly. But because we didn't have federal recognition at that time, we couldn't file our federal income taxes jointly. And it created, the intention of the bill was excellent. The goal, all of the work that was done in California was intended to sort of move same-sex couples who were registered domestic partners as close to marriage as possible in terms of the state-level benefits and obligations that came along with that status. And so this was just a bill that made it so that we had to file our taxes the same way that straight married, that federally recognized married persons had to file theirs. And but it actually there was, it was sort of practically very difficult, or practically more difficult. It ended up costing registered domestic partners, it could end up costing them more in terms of having your taxes prepared. You couldn't just go to H&R Block. You had to actually.
So H&R Block does not support same-sex.
No. No. Sorry, I forgot. I'm on the radio. I didn't know that wasn't what I was saying at all. I was saying that you had to go. It was important to work with folks, with tax professionals who actually had taken the time to understand the implication of this law and how to file your tax returns differently at a federal level than at a state level. And it turns out that if you are currently registered domestic partners only and you're not married, then you still have, this law still applies to you. You still have to file your state level income taxes as either registered domestic partners filing jointly or separately.
Right.
And you still have to file your federal income taxes as individuals. That's it. It's a nerdy tax thing, but it had really practical implications for the community at the time.
For those of you listening right now, you can't see my face. I'm just nodding my head.
I'm trying not to bore you with this. Just nerdy, boring tax stuff.
No, so being queer identified and being in a same-sex relationship was way more needlessly difficult without the same federally recognized recognition in terms of what is being married.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the question of same-sex marriage, I would say that one of the things that the whole discussion over time has made really clear is that marriage is actually a financial arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all kinds of reasons that people engage in it. And as we all know, it has all kinds of social what's the word? Social connotations. Being married, people know what that means. They understand the status. But when it comes down to it, it really does. There's so much of the impact that we have had to talk about in the course of this discussion about whether same-sex couples should be allowed to be married really come down to money,
right?
And being able to protect that and
Yeah, I mean, I have a nice little infographic that I was sharing for a while before the Supreme Court ruling actually went through, and there's just here it is. Is marriage a civil right or a constitutionally protected religious freedom? And it's actually, I'll read it again because it's relevant to this conversation. First off, it says you get married in a church, but you can also get married in a backyard, a courthouse, a hotel, a restaurant, a bar, at a park, and on a sunny beach. Licensed clergy are authorized to officiate weddings. So are mayors, governors, county clerks, justices of the peace. We'll get back to county clerks, current and retired judges. And if you're at sea, your friendly boat captain. In some states, you can officiate your own wedding. That's pretty interesting. Christians have a long history of marriage. but not as long as Hindus, Buddhists, agnostics, atheists, and Jews. Marriage is a sacred ceremony before God, which can be ended with lawyers in a civil court. I like that one. Don't forget the marriage certificate, which is issued by the government, not the church. And those lovely ceremonial words, which include by the power invested in me by the state of blank. So this little infographic here is sort of pushing against the argument that marriage is a religious freedom as opposed to a civil right.
Yeah. I generally don't think that I am well qualified to address the question of religion.
Neither am I.
I would be happy to try and put you in touch with some folks who do a lot of really amazing work. I mean, one of the things that we know is that we, as a movement, we have to do a better job engaging our communities of faith,
right?
All of them, because what's the sort of backlash that we're seeing happen now politically is that there are these bills that are being passed or being put up in lots of states. There are about 100 of them around the country right now that are being called Religious Freedom Restoration Acts.
Yeah.
And generally the argument is that I, as an individual, should be able to discriminate against you because you're lesbian, or frankly, the way the bills are written, because you're Black, or because you're a woman, or because you're Muslim, or
yeah.
because although that's not how they're being how they're being marketed, but that I should be able to do that because I believe I have personal religious beliefs that would support that discrimination. And part of the strategy that for fighting back against these bills, which actually are passing, I mean, they're
right.
getting on the books, right? And we have a presidential election year coming up next year. So the chances are these are going to, they're going to throw a bunch out there, see which ones work, which ones stand up, which ones pass, which ones withstand legal scrutiny, and then they'll take those as a model and put them out for the to be voted on during the presidential election next year, when lots of people will show up at the polls. And so one of the things that needs, like, a big piece of the strategy to fight back against these is to have communities of faith stand up and say, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim, I am Hindu, I am Buddhist, and and this law, and I believe in equality.
Right.
And that is something that as a movement, we need to do a tremendous amount of work on. One of the things that I do outside of my legal practice is I'm on the board of the National LGBTQ Task Force, which is the nation's oldest progressive advocacy organization. And I like to say that we are the progressive voice in the LGBT movement and the LGBT voice in the wider progressive movement. And our organization does a tremendous amount of work around working with communities of faith. And in fact, in a few weeks, there is what we call a Power Summit that's going to be held in Salt Lake City. And it is about bringing together faith leaders to work on being more, building stronger and more welcoming and inclusive communities of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And also specifically to strategize about how to work on work against these Religious Freedom Restoration Act bills that are going on. And this is, so that's what I can say about religion. We have on the staff of the task force, we have some incredible folks who are working on faith around the issues of faith and faith communities. And I'd be happy to put someone in touch with you so you can have conversations with them and they can speak much more articulately about faith than I can.
Absolutely. Please do. It's something that I've sort of tiptoed around a lot on this show, because by no means does my pushing forth on LGBT advocacy have to mean going against established religious organizations and their beliefs, because there's no need to be singularly exclusive in terms of benefits.
Right. And as we were, we were talking about earlier about the intersectionality, there are lots of LGBT people who belong to communities of faith.
Right.
And so as a movement, from my perspective, as a movement for us to try to sort of make those two, being either an LGBT person or being a person of faith, to make those mutually exclusive, it doesn't support our community, because we have a lot of folks in our community who are parts of communities of faith. And the truth is that we have a number of communities of faith here in Sonoma County who are inclusive and welcoming. Some are on their journey towards being more inclusive and more welcoming. But certainly in the Bay Area, we have a large number of inclusive communities of faith, and we still need to build more.
Absolutely. And that's definitely a subject that I'm going to be diving in deeper for, and you're going to be giving me some people to talk to here out in front of our audience, because a lot of people are curious about that. And there's sort of this collision between the law and how the law should face issues of faith and queer identity. So it's very interesting. I mean, I'll be talking about in the next hour about a bakery in Oregon who has refused to pay damages, legal damages, because they've refused to cater to a same-sex couple for their wedding. I mean, despite getting $400,000 in donations. But that's a different point in and of itself. As we are winding down to the last 10 minutes here of the interview, yes, it does go by fast. I want to talk to you. You mentioned the National LGBTQ Task Force. Mm-hmm. Could you expand on what that task force is and what you do and what the group does?
Yeah, I'll do that quickly. So like I said, this is the nation's oldest LGBT advocacy organization. We are really the progressive voice in this. We do a tremendous amount of work at the intersections, all this intersectionality that we were talking about. We do, for example, currently the organization is working really closely with women's reproductive rights organizations. We've done a lot of work around immigration and the Voting Rights Act. That's another huge thing. Everybody needs to be able to vote, including the LGBT community and everyone in it. And I'm on the board of directors for that organization. I've been on the board for about 4 years, and I love it. And since we are winding down, one of the things that this organization does that I think everyone should know about all over the world is we have an annual conference. It's called the Creating Change Conference, and it moves around to different cities each year. In 2016, it is the last week. It's always the last weekend of January. And in 2016, it will be in Chicago. So I'm planning to bring all my warm clothes that I don't really have from California and go to Chicago for 5 days. But it's an astonishing conference. It's 5 days long. It goes from Wednesday to Sunday. Last year, we had more than 4,000 people attend.
No kidding.
A third of the folks who attend are under the age of 23. We make sure there's a tremendous amount of financial support that goes out to make sure that young folks can be at the conference.
Wow.
The first day, the entire first day of the conference is a Racial Justice Institute, which I could talk about for days because I went actually for the first time to that last year, and since, and I still, it was tremendous. And then on the second day of the conference, there are a number of half day long institutes. There's one about on the issues facing LGBT aging, folks who aging in the LGBT community. There are there's one on specifically around trans stuff. We have the organization does a lot of work on trans issues, so this is just a piece of the work that we do. There's also one, and in fact there's a whole track of workshops through the whole weekend,
right,
that are called practice spirit, do justice. I might be getting that wrong, but it's a track of workshops starting with the half day, I believe a half day institute on the second day of the conference that is about being is about communities, faith communities, or people in communities of faith, and the connection with the LGBT community. And there's a whole track of workshops that happen through the weekend on specifically on higher education, LGBT issues in higher education. It's literally a mind-blowing experience for me every year when I go there. If anyone is interested at all in it, they can either go to the website of the task force, which is www.thetaskforce.org, or directly to the Creating Change website, which is www.creatingchange.org. I'd strongly encourage anyone who's listening to take a chance to look at it, and if you can, come, because it is so awesome. It's so awesome.
Yeah.
And also I always host a reception for the Northern California attendees, so I'd love to see your face there.
All freeze together.
Right.
Yeah, well, we have links to taskforce.org and creatingchange.org on thequeerlife.org. This is episode 61. LGBT attorney Naomi Metz here on the Queer Life Radio show. And I want to ask, and that was my next thing. I wanted to ask you about the Sonoma County LGBTQ Giving Circle and your work and whom you're supporting.
Okay. This is so exciting. Thank you for asking. Okay, so it's called the Sonoma County LGBTQI Giving Circle. This is a giving circle that's been established under the auspices of the Community Foundation Sonoma County. It's a pooled fund, so each person who becomes a member of the giving circle, their annual membership goes into a fund that is then pooled, and we use the funds specifically to make grants to local organizations who are doing work that nurtures and benefits the Sonoma County LGBTQI community. And we started working on this about 2 years ago. We've just finished our very first year of grant making, our very first round of grant making. We currently have 115 members, which is so awesome, because when we started, we thought that maybe in our first year we'd get 50 members.
Right.
But we've got 115. It's so exciting. And from a really broad range of folks in Sonoma County, we have a lot. We have gender diversity. We have some racial diversity. We can use more of that. And it's been really exciting. This year we did a series of educational forums for our members on the issues that the group had established as our priorities, and those were youth, seniors, and community building. And then following those educational seminars, we had we sent out requests for proposals from a wide variety of nonprofits, and we ended up getting 11 applications for grants, and we've just given away $50,000 to local organizations.
No
and
kidding.
It's so awesome
Wow.
to be able to do it. And I really quickly, I want to tell you who the grantees were, because it's I'm so thrilled with these. So we one grant is that we gave to an organization called LGBTQ Connections on the Move, and this is actually an organization that has been based in Napa, but we gave them a grant to launch their Sonoma County LGBTQI youth. They do youth leadership development, LGBTQI youth leadership development. So they'll be doing that here. We gave a grant to the Social Advocates for Youth for them to do additional work, providing outreach and services to homeless and disconnected LGBTQI youth in Sonoma County. We gave a grant to the Santa Rosa Community Health Centers specifically to organize and produce a rural transgender conference, which is happening
October 17th from 9 to 5.
Thank you.
I just interviewed Dr. Suji last week.
Awesome. Right. So we got to give a grant to Suji, which is amazing, for that conference. And we gave a grant to Community Matters, the organization that's based in Sebastopol that does the Safe School Ambassadors program, to add two new to add their Safe Schools Ambassador programs to 2 new schools in Sonoma County to create safe and inclusive school climates for LGBTQI students. And then we also gave a grant to the Sonoma County Human Services Department, Adult and Aging Services, to provide cultural competency training and to organize support groups to improve services to LGBT seniors in Sonoma County. So one of the things that's, and the members of the group all had a chance to review all of the applications and to vote on them. And so the decision about this funding was really sort of as democratic as possible. And it's great because we ended up being able to provide these grants to such a wide range of issue areas in Sonoma County. And it's thrilling. We've already had the folks who are leading the cultural competency training through the Sonoma County Human Services Department are actually, there's an ad that's supposed to be coming out in the Press Democrat this weekend about the services that they're going to be providing using that grant money. So it's really wonderful.
Incredible.
If anybody wants to learn more about that, I know the contact information. Jay Molyneux is the our person at the Sonoma County Foundation who's really been very instrumental in getting this going. And so his contact information will be on the website.
Yes,
on
it is.
Kaiya's website, right?
Yep, it's on.
Okay.
It's live up right now, and we are just about out of time here for this interview. I know a little bit of rapid fire here, but I want to take this moment to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your time here, sharing your knowledge, and doing all the incredible work that you're doing out there in the community.
You're so welcome. Like I said, I'm happy to do it. I get a lot of joy out of it. And if anybody wants to help, let me know. There's always volunteer opportunities.
If you're looking for volunteer opportunities in the LGBTQIA community and you want to become the last part of that A there and be an ally, feel free to hit us up on The Queer Life, and I can steer you in the right direction. And I can also put up more links to reach out to Naomi as well. Okay, so again, thank you so much. And again, if you're just tuning in right now, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I'm your host, Kaiya Kramer, and this is episode 61, my interview with LGBT attorney Naomi Metz. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to go away for a short break, but we'll be back with more news and perspective after this.
This is KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga. Esta es KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga.
Caminando, caminando.
KBBF 89.1, contigo, ayer, hoy y siempre.
Está usted escuchando una radio cultural al servicio del norte de la bahía, KBBF 89.1 de FM.
All right. Hello, everybody. Again, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I am your host, Kaiya Kramer, and this is episode 61, LGBT attorney Naomi Metz. This is now 4 minutes after the top of the hour, and this is the second leg of the show. If you'd like to catch my interview with Naomi, you can visit thequeerlife.org and hit episode 61, which should be the first link on the page, whether you're on a mobile device or on a computer. You can find that there. But I wanted to make a special announcement for news and perspectives portion of the show here. Is that what's coming up is presented by the National Organization for Women and Women's Spaces, which is a radio show here on KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga, put on by Elaine Holtz, which is every Monday from 11 to 12 p.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning there. and it's a movie night showing the film called Iron Jawed Angels. You can contact Elaine Holtz at sbcglobal.net, or give her a call, 707-527-5987. The showing is Tuesday night, October 20th, and it's a free event. And it's an English-speaking film with Spanish subtitles being shown. It's going to be shown here at KBBF at the studio, and you can come in, take a tour of the studio, and watch this film about women's rights. Iron Jawed Angels stars Hilary Swank, Frances O'Connor, Julia Ormond, and Angelica Houston. This moving presentation takes a fresh look at a pivotal event in American history from 1916 to 1920. Iron Jawed Angels tells the true story of how defiant and brilliant young activists Alice Paul, played by Hilary Swank, and Lucy Burns, played by Frances O'Connor, took the women's suffrage movement by storm, putting their lives at risk to help American women win the right to vote. This is an absolutely important part of American history, the women getting the right to vote. And so come check it out. Meet Elaine and meet some of the people of KBBF. And that is, again, taking place Tuesday, October 20th from 6 to 9:30 p.m. I want to make another announcement here. Last week, I interviewed Dr. Suji Tamar Mattis of Santa Rosa Community Health, and they're putting on a life conference, and it's by and large specifically for transgender people and families and friends and allies, which will be taking place October the 17th from 9 to 5 p.m. And you can attend there if you are having a hard time financially. The conference is free. Donations are accepted, of course, against the Trans Life Conference. And again, if you're questioning your gender identity and you're concerned, or you are wondering, or you have a kid who's questioning their gender identity and you're not sure and you need resources, this is a good opportunity for you to come on out and get some information that will be available. And there's going to be workshops, and it's going to be generally very informative. Again, if you have financial difficulty, it will be a free event. I'm going to take this next opportunity here to play a segment from my exclusive podcast, Trans Atheist Podcast, which is under the Queer Life family on thequeerlife.org. Trans Atheist Podcast, which is headed up by Maddie Love out there in Minneapolis, and she's doing a fantastic job on creating high quality material. And the name of this current episode is, it's episode 30, The Satanic Temple. Maddie, her guest is John Reisner, who is the chapter head of the Minneapolis chapter of the Satanic Temple. But fair warning to all listeners, if you're going into this interview looking for the best recipe for cooking babies, you will be sorely disappointed. Again, there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of educated knowledge in there, and so check out Trans Atheist Podcast on thequeerlife.org, which is part of the Queer Life family. I'm going to play for you a short clip of that episode prepared for me by Maddie herself. All right, check it out. Again, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show.
Down on Skype with John Reisner, the chapter head of the Satanic Temple of Minneapolis. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, I want to start off right away with dispelling any myths that people might have when they hear Satanic Chapter or Satanic Chapel. So I want to ask you a few questions that you've probably answered thousands of times already, and you probably can guess my first question. Do Satanists at the Satanic Temple Minneapolis chapter, do you worship Satan? And if not, why do you call yourself Satanists?
We categorically do not worship the devil. We are an atheistic Luciferian organization. We use the term Satan as emblematic of kind of our guiding principles. The Lucifer of the Enlightenment, if you will, as typified by some of the more romantic, authors of the Enlightenment, your Shelley and your Blake and your Anatole France. Our Satan is more of the gentleman bastard who's offering a contrarian opinion. It has absolutely nothing to do with Judeo-Christianity. And I think it's largely, we use the term or the word Satan because it's easier for people to recognize instead of saying we're the temple of Apollyon or Azazel or any of these. It's an archetype that has been known by countless names throughout the centuries. Satan just happens to be the most recent and the most familiar to most people.
So Satan, when you use the term Satan, if I'm understanding you right, it's just to say we're kind of standing against a lot of the perceived established religions. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we're anti-theist. We're certainly pro, defending the Establishment Clause and removing the influence of church on state as much as possible. Yeah, but we certainly, with respect to, acting as a symbolic representation of the, continued rebellion against arbitrary authority, that's, that you've hit the nail on the head in that regard.
So there are people in religious circles especially, and even in the atheist community, who believe that when you use the term Satan, that it's problematic because it causes an unnecessary divisiveness, and it kind of creates unnecessary controversy at best and provides extra ammunition for the devout against secularism at worst. What kind of response would you offer for those who want Satanism just to go away?
Well, we're not going to. So, that pretty neatly sums up that argument. But the atheist community, by and large, at least our reception in Minneapolis has been outstanding. We are one of the few chapters to enjoy very positive relations with the atheist community. There are some members, I've been told, who are sort of more staunchly allied with the old guard of atheism. That doesn't want the scrutiny of being associated with the Satanic Temple to be applied to them. And most of that, I think, is just a knee-jerk. It's kind of a holdover from the Satanic Panic of the 80s. Lying atheists get accused of being devil worshippers enough as it is. So when you invite a highly polarized organization like our own, they kind of, rightfully so, are reluctant to, throw their hat in the ring with us. But once they understand that our aims are essentially the same, we just have a different sort of aesthetic. We have a more militant approach. I think atheists are inherently more polite than we are. I think it could be argued. Certainly they've been nothing but kind to me and have gone way out of their way to welcome us and to accommodate us. The irony is the most vocal criticism we receive is from other satanic groups who are either theistic or who think that they hold the patent on what it means to be a real Satanist. So, a great portion of that, I think, is probably jealousy, perhaps. I won't give them the courtesy of naming names, but one of the more nationally recognized satanic bodies is essentially little more than a marketing strategy. It's a money machine, and they do very little, to guarantee personal autonomy in terms of policy changes or activism. So our approach, at least within my own chapter, we can consider us to be sort of the existentialists of the satanic movement in Minneapolis, in that any decision we make for ourselves as regards personal autonomy, by extension, we make for everyone else. So part of our proselytizing, if you will, involves guaranteeing everyone that autonomy, lest we sort of render our own valueless in the face of people who are still being oppressed by a religious majority.
So when you say the personal autonomy, you're saying, look, we want the right to practice our religion, lack of religion, however we want. We want also to give you that same ability, but we don't want the government telling us one way or the other. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's sort of the umbrella concern, I guess, is just that, religion kept a private matter. Certainly things like tax-exempt status of churches and all these other sorts of things are broader spectrum issues. But, on a personal level, bodily autonomy is a big issue for us. So reproductive rights and, of course, the gay marriage, which is now sort of rendered, not a moot point, but, certainly now that it's legal across the country, we've been rejoicing, and the fundamentalists have been gnashing their teeth, which has provided us with an endless quantity of schadenfreude and just delight. But certainly things as regards sexual orientation and circumcision, female genital mutilation, anything that would interfere with a person's ability to autonomously make a decision as regards their body, no matter how minimal or trivial it might seem. That's something that we take very seriously. So personal freedom to us begins and ends where your rights begin infringing on someone else's.
That old cliche of your right to swing your fist ends at my nose.
Right.
All right, everybody. That was a short clip of a much longer trans atheist podcast exclusive to the Queer Life family on thequeerlife.org. If you'd like to hear the rest of that interview, and it is extremely interesting, visit thequeerlife.org, and you can find the rest of that and all the rest of the episodes of Trans Atheist Podcast, as well as finding episodes of Lesbian Honest podcast that is put together by Leshaguita and is high quality from the lesbian perspective. So I'm just really extremely excited to be sharing with you all this LGBT news and all these perspectives, because again, that is the name of the show. And again, if you are just tuning in right now, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews here on KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga and on KWTF 88.1 FM Bodega Bay. This show airs live every Friday night from 6 to 8 p.m. on KBBF 89.1 FM and is replayed every Tuesday night from 9 to 11 p.m. on KBBF 89.1 FM. If you'd like to hear it online, you can go to thequeerlife.org, or you can hear it on KWTF 88.1 FM through their online stream every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. And of course, we're available by podcast. Download it via your favorite podcasting app, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes podcast, whatever your choice is, it is available on there too. So if you're going on a long road trip and you're going to be out of radio range, you can get the podcast and tune that in. Also, too, the show is available on YouTube, youtube.com/thequeerliferadio. And we're on Facebook, facebook.com/thequeerlife. And if you have any burning questions, you can always tweet us at The Queer Life, or you can tweet me individually at This Is Kaiya, at This Is Kaiya. For any more information and getting connected into more LGBT news. Next up here is an article from Cody Charles on everydayfeminism.com. It is called 10 Common Things Well-Intentioned Allies Do That Are Actually Counterproductive. And this is an article that was originally published on The Body Is Not an Apology and republished on everydayfeminism.com. Well-intentioned people make mistakes, lots of them. Mistakes must be expected, and being held accountable has to be expected as well. The points below outline some of the common behaviors that show up often in social justice conversations. I want to be clear that we all participate in some of the following counterproductive acts. We're not all privileged or all oppressed. We are complex people with complex identities that intersect in complex ways. Therefore, we all show up in problematic ways with our privilege. I own that my background is from the higher education setting, but I think the points below can be useful for all folks interested in creating dynamic change in the communities around them. Moreover, the piece was written in the midst of the Michael Brown and Eric Garner non-indictments. Many more people could be listed, so some of it may feel specific to race. However, these rules apply beyond the identity of race. In fact, these rules only exist in the dynamic of intersections. Below are 10 counterproductive behaviors that people who want to do good commit and must actively work to correct. And again, I'm going to interject on this piece here several times to let people know and sort of explain the understanding and the thinking of what this writer is saying. When you are an ally in terms of a gender, an LGBT ally, or a race ally, or a culture ally, or what have you, there's a great deal of background that you're getting into when you participate in another community that isn't necessarily your own. And so yes, there is responsibility to do a little bit of education for yourself too, but I also want to say too is, if you have found that you've made a faux pas concerning speaking about somebody else's race or gender identity or sexual orientation, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. And it's not something you should feel guilty about. Should you be aware if you'd accidentally said something that caused emotional grief to somebody from that community? Yes, be aware. Awareness is good. Mindfulness is good. But if indeed somebody's having an adverse reaction to something that you'd said, just for out of lack of knowledge, it's not the end of the world, and you shouldn't feel like you are being put down because you made that simple mistake. You can still be an ally and make mistakes. That's my little disclaimer to this list here, but I do think it is a good list. Number 1, it says being quick to marginalize someone else's experience. I was walking through a hotel lobby with colleagues. We were headed to a conference social wearing business attire. There were quite a few conference attendees roaming around the lobby area at the time, all wearing business attire as well. It was a fairly loud, mingling setting. An older white woman walked up to me and asked if I knew where she could get fresh towels. I was puzzled for a moment, which then indicated to the woman that I probably could not help her. After the exchange, I looked at my friend in disbelief, not utter disbelief or shock, because it was not my first time experiencing this marginalized view on the identities that I hold as in a person of color, but it did catch me off guard at my professional organization's national conference, a place where we could exchange ideas on how to better serve, educate, and develop the students that we work with. I remember telling a few colleagues later at dinner and getting this response, quote, "I'm sure she didn't mean it like that." When somebody shares an experience like this with you, please stop yourself from analyzing the situation. Listen, observe, connect with the emotion, and experience how real it is to the other person, which should in turn make it real to you. No questions, just listen and learn. Hold on to your questions, which are the manifestation of your wanting the world to be a kind, good-hearted place. It's because you see yourself in that older white woman. Get past that. Be there for your friend, colleague, and mentor/mentee, and maybe ask questions later. And I find this to be quite common in my own experience as a transgender woman moving through the world. And somebody will say, will I mean, for instance, something that's very common is somebody will I'll walk by and I'll hear them say something very clearly transphobic, like, "Oh, look, that's actually a dude," or something, and laugh or whatever, and or I thought I might have heard it wrong. I'll often have friends or people around me say, it's like, "Oh, well, are you sure they were talking about you?" Or "You shouldn't let that bother you." So it was more that these people who I was talking to were advising me how I should react, as opposed to acknowledging my having experienced hearing these types of comments. And again, I do agree that we all have our own existence. We all have our own issues that we're dealing with in terms of our own representation of self on planet Earth here. But feeling hurt or feeling affected by these people in their comments is valid, and it's part of the human experience. Number 2 here is choosing not to speak up. Your choosing not to speak up has either to do with the fear of your oppressed identity being pounced upon, or the presence of your privilege. Regardless, too often the courageous few are tasked alone with holding the integrity of inclusiveness in spaces. Too often, the oppressed have to make a dynamic choice to either speak or stay silent. To stay silent comes with making peace with your inferiority to the dominant culture, self-hatred, and finding comfort in the status quo. To speak is to risk not being a team player, being identified as overly sensitive, pulling the race/gender/orientation card. Sound familiar? Not being asked to happy hour, not being considered for promotion, and falling into a simplified caricature of one's already watered down self. Do your work. Consider perspective as you enter and claim space. Pay attention, observe, and always consider that the ideas being explored in any space you enter are based on whiteness and heteronormativity, the gender binary, specifically the cis male, able-bodied, middle, upper class perspective. Speak up. Do not allow your colleagues and friends to take on the sole responsibility of shifting culture from normal to dynamic. And you can find the rest of these items here on this list, 10 mistakes, if you will, or common things well-intentioned allies do that are actually counterproductive, on thequeerlife.org on this episode. So you can find that available there on the website. This is the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews on KBBF 89.1 FM and KWTF 88.1 FM, Bodega Bay. And all this information is available on thequeerlife.org. Next up here is from pinknews.co.uk. is Joe Biden, Vice President, declares support for trans people joining the military. The Vice President praised the LGBT community and declared his support for trans people serving openly in the U.S. military. Biden's declaration is the strongest yet from somebody in the Obama administration. His supporters say his speech echoed his early endorsement of marriage equality in 2012. Before that of Obama and possible presidential rival Hillary Clinton. Although the White House says Obama supports a Pentagon review aimed at ending the trans ban, neither the president nor the military has confirmed that the policy will be changed. Quote, no longer is there any question transgender people are able to serve in the United States military, Biden told a crowd of 3,000 gay rights activists at Human Rights Campaign's annual gala dinner. Quote, it's simple, the vice president said. All Americans are qualified to serve, should be able to serve. His comments come after Defense Secretary Ash Carter said the Pentagon's current regulations banning trans individuals are outdated. He has ordered a study aimed at formally ending the ban, with a decision set to be made by May 2016. Biden, who has yet to announce whether he will run in the 2016 election, went on to declare trans rights to be, quote, the civil rights issue of our time, as he delivered the keynote speech. He also said the gay community shouldn't live in fear of, quote, those shrill voices, still trying to undo same-sex marriage because the country has, quote, moved so far beyond them and their appeals to prejudice and fear and homophobia. He praised the LGBT community for their campaigning for marriage equality and giving the straight community in America the courage to join them. Quote, the American people are so much better than their leaders give them credit for, he said. However, he warned that there are homophobes still left. Most of them are running for president, in a jab at the Republican candidates he could imminently be facing. Hillary Clinton was originally due to deliver the keynote speech, but had already agreed to appear on Saturday Night Live. She instead hosted and delivered a breakfast speech for the Human Rights Commission, telling a crowd of LGBT supporters that she is, quote, running for president to stand up for the fundamental rights of LGBT Americans. You can watch Biden's, Vice President Joe Biden's speech on thequeerlife.org, episode 61, LGBT attorney Naomi Metz, under the current events section of the show. We're going to go away for a short break here and hear a couple words from our sponsors, but after that we will be back and talking about a news segment, or I'll be sharing a news segment on NBC about a transgender kid. And I love sharing these children's segments here, so you'll be able to hear firsthand from a transgender youth what it's like to come out at such a young age. All right, we'll be right back after this short break. All right, everybody. Again, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I'm your host, Kaiya Kramer. And this, again, like I said, this next portion here is from NBC News covering a transgender kid. I think she's about 12 years old, and it's a beautiful, touching story here of her coming out, her parents' acceptance, and questions she's asking about her own transition. So I leave this piece to you, and again, the links to all this is available on thequeerlife.org, episode 61. I'm going to play this piece for you, and after this piece, I'm going to be continuing our news segment and talking about an article from planettransgender.com by Kelly Busey. Dallas man set to be given probation for the confessed murder of a trans woman, Jeanette Tovar. That and more here on thequeerlife.org. Here is the NBC piece.
At 10 years old, Josie Romero believed she was born in the wrong body, and her parents have been seeking a controversial hormone therapy that would start chemically changing her boy body into an adolescent girl's.
14 inches. 14 inches? A foot and 2 inches?
Yeah. Estrogen treatment is irreversible and would make Josie sterile. But Josie and her mother never doubted it was the right thing until an unexpected conversation happened one afternoon.
But on the inside, where nobody else can see?
Yeah.
Are you a boy or are you a girl?
Maybe I'm a boy inside and a girl outside.
Really?
Yeah, is that true?
Only you know the answer to that. So if you wanted to grow up to be a man,
yeah,
would you tell me?
Yeah.
Hey, if you wanted to grow up and be a man, you could.
I want to be... Sometimes I think I'm a boy, sort of, but I want to be a girl.
Yeah.
Will you have me if I'm a boy?
Of course. I would love you no matter what. I always have, and I always will.
It was the first time Vanessa ever heard Josie sound uncertain.
I feel like maybe there's a part of you that's afraid to tell me what you really want. What if I said, oh, please don't be a girl?
Well, I guess I'll be a boy.
No, honey.
I need to listen to you, my mom.
Well, yeah, you need to listen to me about, what's healthy to eat, and you need to listen to me about what time to go to bed. But you are the one. I have to listen to you.
Yeah, well, if you said I need to be a boy, maybe
no.
I have to.
No. For her to have any indecision now, I don't know what it's rooted in, and I really need to find that out.
I feel like I'm about to cry.
I'm just kind of surprised by some of these answers today. It's the first time you've given them to me. Everything I thought I knew is kind of in question.
Had Vanessa's wholehearted, unwavering support of Josie's transition actually pushed her child too far, too fast?
The thought of her having made such a huge decision in her life, all based on what she thought I wanted, that would be traumatic for me.
Bioethicist Dr. Margaret Moon, who opposes opposite-sex hormone therapy for kids Josie's age, says most 9 and 10-year-olds are not mature enough to participate in life-altering medical decisions.
They're not sure of who they are, and they can't really offer their parent that sort of reassurance.
Even Dr. Olson says there is no exact science that can determine who is truly transgender.
What's missing in the data right now is these exact characteristics mean that this person is for sure going to be a trans adolescent and adult. We don't have that data.
Now, the estrogen thing I find concerning. A decision is being made whether or not Josie will have children, her own biological children in the future.
That's why the role of blockers is so important. They get an opportunity for 2 years, 3 years to really work with a mental health therapist on what it's going to mean to be transgender.
But that could still put you at age 12. To me, it seems ridiculous to have a kid at age 12, 13, 14 deciding whether they want to have biological children when they're 20, 30, or 40. I mean,
well, they make the decision to kill themselves at 12 and 13. That's a pretty powerful decision. We take an oath, first do no harm. If doing nothing is doing harm, you have to do something.
You and your mom were talking, she was combing your hair. You said to her, would you still love me if I was a boy?
Oh, yeah, that.
Why did you ask her that?
You know, my dad, when I started to change, he was a little sad because he wanted his little boy back. I didn't want the same thing to happen to my mom, like being sad all the time.
Josie and her psychologist discussed that moment of wavering, and just a few weeks shy of her 11th birthday, she told us she never really changed her mind. She still really wants to be a girl. Now, what about people, Josie, who watch this and say, you know what, she's going through a phase in her life?
I say, no, I'm gonna stay like a girl because this is who I truly am.
You look really nervous. You'll be okay.
Come on in here.
So what do you think? Are you starting? Are you seeing any signs?
Yeah.
Okay. And how are you feeling about that?
I'm a little anxious.
15 months after her first visit, Josie was back with Dr. Olson. After examining Josie in private, Dr. Olson had a decision.
You are in the perfect place to start on blockers.
And she promises to begin giving her estrogen, female hormones, in 2 years.
Around 13. That's what I think. Yes, you're not going to develop breast buds on the blockers, but you're not going to wait until 16 to start. You know that, okay?
Josie received the blockers as an implant in her arm.
It's okay if you cry.
So with all the bravery she could muster,
you're going to feel a little bit of a...
Josie held on tight
Ow!
As another chapter opened in this young girl's life.
Closing up the skin.
A lot of times it strikes me that had this happened just 20 years ago,
Thank you.
I wouldn't have been able to give her blockers and she would have had to go through male puberty. That terrifies me. It's all done. Do you want a hug? I don't know that she would have survived male puberty. You know, how is she going to prove to somebody that she is a girl? At best, you know, she would have been shaving every day and been the man in a dress. And that might be great for some people, but it certainly wasn't who she is.
So much about this child's life is yet unwritten, but Josie has predictions of her own.
When I grow up, I'm going to help save animals, habitats, like the ice for the polar bears. As an adult, my hair will be very long, blonde, wavy, and super pretty. I'm going to marry a boy. I'll be a tiny bit taller than my mom. I want to be a mommy. I'm going to be very beautiful.
All right, everybody. If you're just tuning in right now, again, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. That piece there was from NBC News covering a 10-year-old transgender kid. And the reason why I share such a piece is because it raises questions. It's bringing up the point that do these kids have the ability to make lifetime choices that will affect their bodies irreversibly, and eventually render themselves unable to have children? And that's a good question. And I love here that this child here was bringing up the point that, sometimes she feels like a boy. And so just to clarify the questions here that you might be having is, the kid in here was assigned male at birth, was quote unquote born male, but felt like a girl. And so the mom was very, very supportive and was encouraging in terms of presenting as female and being a girl. Mind you, no drugs, no hormones or whatever prior to this filming here. And that's normal, and that's part of a new thing. But the mother was concerned that the kid, that this young girl, Josie, was wanting to just do what she thought was right for her mom. And the interviewer for NBC was asking, well, how can we let these big decisions happen for kids who are 10, 12, 13, 14 years old, that will make it so they can or cannot have children? And the doctor's response was right on. It's like, on the one hand, no, nobody really knows, and there's no 100% scientific way to know if somebody is transgender. That's a self-identification thing. There's no transgender gene. There's nothing in terms of hormone irregularities that points to saying that somebody is transgender. But transgender people generally know, a lot of transgender people generally know at a very, very young age, whether or not they are full on feminine or full on masculine. I mean, who is, whether you're a cisgender or transgender, is up to the individual, and it's up to probability. But the idea here is the hormone blockers, and this is just a clarification, because a lot of people say, well, why put them on female hormones so early? Or if it's somebody who was assigned a female at birth and who was wanting to become a boy, a man, and putting them on hormones. The hormone blockers give them more time to figure out, okay, do I want to go through puberty as a boy, or do I want to go through puberty as a girl? And the number of lives that it saves is incredible. There are a ton of trans youth that have committed suicide because they felt like it was quote unquote too late for them. Myself and a lot of other trans people have had to go through puberty. Like in my case, I was assigned male at birth. I was born a boy. And so I had to go through male puberty, and my voice dropped and I got bigger and blah, 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 a whole bunch of other things. And observing the girls around me, I thought, why is that not happening to me? And a lot of trans people experience this as well, thinking, well, now I am just, and the mother even said it in here as well. It's like she didn't want her kid to be a man in a dress, which I actually take a little bit of issue with that statement, because there are many trans people who have come out at later points in life, even past the age of 20, who have gone through male puberty and quote unquote look like a quote unquote man in a dress. And some people have said that about me too. But it's not about being overly sensitive. It's about understanding that gender is fluid, and that we all have bits and pieces of both genders in us, and both forms of expression, masculinity and femininity in all of us, cisgender or straight gender or transgender, excuse me. And this child here, she's acknowledging that. And because she's saying, well, I sometimes feel like I'm supposed to be a boy, doesn't a lot of people say, oh, well, there it is. She's doubting that she's trans, that she should be a boy. Don't let her make these decisions for hormone blockers or getting on estrogen or what have you. But because somebody acknowledges being a part of a gender spectrum doesn't mean that they're not sure in terms of where they fall on the spectrum. It's I know even in my own experience, yes, I personally identify as a trans woman, a transsexual woman, and I present as female. I'm legally female, but I also say that I'm two-spirited, that I'm also a composition of genders. If you're a math person, you can say f of g of x. It's composition. And like I said, aren't we all a composition of the different forms of gender expression and gender identity? And the sooner that we acknowledge that as humanity, the more we'll reach this level of understanding and compassion that comes from everybody, whether you're a manly man, a girly girl, a tomboy, a girly boy, a trans woman, a trans man. It's expression and gender identity is just so varied and amazing, and the human condition is amazing, and the sooner we get to understanding that, the more harmony we can have. I mean, peace, love, and happiness, that's part of all that I'm talking about here on this show, because it's so hard to seeing people struggle. I do talk to a lot of trans people who have come out past their male puberty or come out past their female puberty and are wanting to go the other way in terms of what hormones can get them. And people have asked me, oh, if I take hormones, will I become a woman? Or if I take hormones, will I become a man? And the answer is, hormones will not make you a woman. Testosterone will not make you a man. It's how you feel on the inside. And it doesn't matter how masculine you act, or it doesn't matter how feminine you act. You are just as much a woman or just as much a man as anybody else. But in terms of being trans, we have to acknowledge too that we are multifaceted. And that's what's beautiful about being trans, is coming from this background of being assigned male at birth, of being assigned female at birth, and feeling beyond this gender binary, what men are supposed to be and what women are supposed to be. I'm not saying that every single person is on the planet is beyond this gender binary, and I'm not saying that people who very strongly identify as female or male are also other pieces. So everybody has their own identification, and I want to respect that. But I also want to say that, again, everybody's different, and everybody has different experiences. And just because people don't necessarily fit into our cookie cutter images of how a woman is supposed to be or how a man is supposed to be, doesn't mean they're any less of a man or a woman. / end that rant a little bit here. I just feel really moved, because we are living in a time where these kids can come out and say to their parents, hey mom, I feel like a girl, and I'm tired of kids at school calling me gay. Can I go to a different school, and can I start being a girl? And to have parents say, yes, honey, I support you. What do you need? And I mean, that's just unheard of. I mean, this parent here was saying, yeah, 20 years ago, she wouldn't be able to get the social and medical support that she wanted for her daughter. But it's just, it's a changing of our times. And I know a lot of people out there saying, oh, well, my kid was saying the other day that he wanted to be Optimus Prime, or this other kid saying he wanted to be Batman, or this other kid saying he wanted to be a truck or whatever, or my daughter said she wanted to be a pony. Is that different than gender identity? I mean, yeah, I'm going to first off say, yes, it is different. And these children feel very compelled to be other than what they were told they were. When we come out of the womb, can you say to your doctor, oh, I identify as female, or I identify as male? No, you are assigned that on a birth certificate. And if you are listening to this right now and you're questioning your gender identity, you're questioning your sexual orientation, and you're wondering how you fit into all this, I'm going to say, first off, your concern, you're wondering, you're questioning, it's valid, but I'm going to let you know it's okay. It's okay to question your sexual orientation. It's okay to question and think, am I gay? Am I lesbian? Am I bisexual? Does being bisexual mean that I'm gay? Does being transgender mean that I'm gay, or does being transgender mean that I'm lesbian, or does it mean that I'm less than? Does it mean that I'll lose my friends or whatever? It is what it is. And I just want to let you know that if you are questioning your gender identity, if you are questioning your sexual orientation, and you're wondering what's going to happen, I first and foremost, I always say speak to a counselor, speak to a therapist. I have a huge list right now on thequeerlife.org under Get Help for gender specialists and LGBT specialists who can talk to you about navigating this, because it's not simple. You might feel like, oh, well, hey, I feel like I'm supposed to be a girl, or I feel like I'm supposed to be, or I feel like I'm bisexual, or I feel like I'm gay. It's a process of self-exploration, and it's your job just as much as it is your therapist's job, or your parents' job, or your spiritual advisor's job, to help move you in a direction that is going to be healthy for you. I don't advocate coming out, and especially if it's going to be dangerous for you. If you know you're going to be hurt, that might not be the best place or person to come out to. If you know your parents are going to harm you, or if you're going to experience abject physical harm, take these things into consideration. Consult with somebody. But I just want to let you know, it's going to be okay. It is going to be okay. It doesn't mean you're not going to work hard. It doesn't mean you're not going to face struggle or hardship, but it's going to be okay. I know that there was a certain point, at least in my own life, thinking to myself, I'll never be able to come out. I don't want people to call me a freak or a man in dress or whatever. But you get stronger. Eventually you will get stronger, and eventually you will be happier for it. You're going to have to work for it. It's not going to come. Happiness will not come overnight. Stability will not come overnight, but these things can be had. You can be queer identified and hold a good job. You can be queer identified and respected in the community. You can be queer identified and get an education. These are all possibilities, and I want to leave you with that note. And again, I want to thank you so much for listening this evening. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. Again, I am your host, Kaiya Kramer, and this has been episode 61, my interview with LGBT attorney Naomi Metz. You can find this episode and more available on thequeerlife.org. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful night.